With the GIS applications article assignment, I was tasked with wildlife and habitat management. And from that, I picked 4 articles, the first being Identifying the Most Valuable Parcels to Protect by Megan T. Jones. And the summary of this was that the Three Valley Conservation Trust in Oxford, Ohio was tasked with identifying and prioritizing which land parcels were a higher priority and which land parcels were a lower priority in order to protect streams and promote prime agricultural lands and decrease habitat fragmentation. Environmental planning ideas of the TVCT area work towards permanently preserving habitat, open space, and dynamic landscapes. The tool Land Priority Protection Model uses Model Builder in an ArcMap 10.6 to identify the areas of the land that are best suited for the parameters of this specific conservation effort or task seeming most valuable. This applies conservation criteria to the land by weighting, ranking, and scoring the different parcels of land. This program is able to identify and model the high priority land that best fits the given parameter inputs. Each of the criteria is evaluated within its own submodel and is calculated individually. Then each submodel is calculated and put into a model together. All of the submodels are added together. Each submodel has an identified purpose to create an attribute field for holding the score or rank. Following the initial analysis of the detection and selection of the strategic habitat by using the exported parcels. The final conservation model is computed last to accommodate all other criteria calculations. The Model Builder was selected as the main way to manipulate data and analyze it due to its versatility. The use of GIS will be going forward to identify and adjust data layers and features class weights to align with new criteria and different parameters. So they're using the same GIS steps and systems, just adding different inputs to be able to use for different products in the future. The second article I read was Ride the Wave. Ocean scientists use cloud computing to model dispersion. And this is by Kyle Wilcox and Tiffany C. Vance. This article was about the oceanic scientist who computed modeling that can simulate the complex three-dimensional movements of ocean currents and how it affects fish, larvae, oil spills, and different marine debris. This uses particle tracking, and particle tracking models can be used to study how fish larvae are dispersed. The models that are used can be computed in one dimension, which describes the motion of the particle at a point, in two-dimensional, which the models allow showing the evolution of patterns. A three-dimensional model simulate the movement of particles, and fourth-dimensional models provide spatial and temporal understanding. Larva Map simulates passive, long-term, and large-scale larval fish transport. It is built with Adobe Flex and the Open Scales mapping application program in order to provide a GPS map. Users define larval release parameters including temporal extent, release duration, number of particles, and species, all from within a web browser, and add the parameters. A data retrieval system was built into Larval Map, so data can be retrieved on the per particle basis and cached for use by any particles within the same grid cell of the forcing dataset. An R-tree spatial indexing implementation allows rapid positional lookups against structured and unstructured datasets. Larva Map was then re-architectured for cloud-based infrastructure. The original modeling system was made to be a single application. From this single application, RAM was implemented in order for a large-scale particle run to compute. Larva map creators are hoping to expand their app to incorporate different biological behaviors and more species data. They can then use this data for upcoming projects and different projects other than fish dispersal. The third article was Tracking Forests, Reforestation Mapping Monitors Seed from Source to Site by Shen Ding and Leslie McAuley. And this article was about the British Columbian forests and natural disturbances of mountain pine beetles, fire, and extreme weather events and how they are increasing. Studies and projects are being done to investigate reforestation due to the increase of natural disturbances. One of the main goals of this project was to create GIS methodology in order to investigate the GRM spatio-temporal trends to inform GIM practices. A GIS-based monitoring method was used to track how reforestation was distributed over time and space. So this methodology was able to monitor and investigate the GRM practices and how they were used to reforest areas over time. ArcGIS tools and Model Builder were used to conduct geoanalytics of historical GRM seed use practices. And the seed use practices are seed selection, frequency, and deployment of the seed. And so that basically covers from the source all the way through the growth and how that affects reforestation and forest cover change and regeneration, and whether that can be natural regeneration or planting, and what needs to be implemented and what was historically implemented. ArcGIS tools and Model Builder were used to conduct geoanalytical data of historical GRM seed use practices like seed selection, frequency, and deployment of the seed. These maps are able to show the spatial hierarchy of the seed maps. So there are different seed maps throughout history, and these ArcGIS tools and model builders were able to compile all of those historical seed maps into one catch-all area that was able to show the spatial hierarchy and what type of regeneration tactic was used and how it was selected, when it was selected, and when it was deployed. For the last article, I read Monitoring and Modeling, Assessing the Impact of Invasive Plants on the Landscape by Dawn Lemke, Jennifer Brown, Philip Holm, and Wabishit Tadasi. And this was about a particular study that looked at forests' invasive plants and how they were distributed through North America's Cumberland Plateau and that surrounding mountain region. The CPMR assesses the tools used to the map to determine the distribution of invasive plants using existing databases. From these existing databases, the two main data sets that were used are geospatial data and species data. The geospatial data included information derived from digital elevation models that contain slope, aspect, elevation, curvature, and solar radiation. The data also comes from temporal Landsat surveys of roads, land use, human population density, rainfall, and temperature. In the study area, there were 1,900 points that were surveyed and analyzed. While using predictive modeling in the studies, the input variables were very important because the project assessed important variables for any correlation. And then they took those data points from the 1,900 and any that were too similar were removed, and it was broken down so that none of the points were too similar and it only had the minimum data that was needed. Digital elevation models were used, and they were made the max ENT to calculate elevation, slope, and temperature of the area. The max ENT software helped in order to assess how much each variable contributed to the model. The model input with the right data predicted the species occurrence. And these were all of the wildlife and habitat uses for GIS and how they use GIS in resource management.